Hey there, nation, and welcome to the show where we help you to play miniatures wargaming on a budget. It is I, Commander Cheapskate, and we are back with another episode of Way of the Underhive. This is a series that is dedicated to brand new players to games of Necromunda, and if you're wondering about how to start up your very first gang for your very first campaign, this is the series for you guys. So we've been going through each of the different gangs for Necromunda, and today we're actually be focusing on Redemptionists. Now, I've done a House Caldor video earlier where I talked about House Caldor as well as the Redemptionist counterparts and how you can make a gang out of them in a previous video. This video is a little bit different though, and the reason why is because this video is focusing primarily and actually exclusively on just Redemptionists only. So that way you'll be building your own outlaw Redemptionist gang right off the bat, and that's exactly what we'll be covering on this one. We'll be talking about the strengths and the weaknesses of a pure Redemptionist gang while stuck with the individual fighters, what their strengths and weaknesses are and how best to use them, and then finally we'll give you 3 different lists that you can use for your very first starting list for your first campaign of Necromunda using Redemptionists. So with that being said, let's get this video on a roll. Alright, so now let's talk about the strengths of the Redemptionists. First of all, they have powerful close combat fighters with interesting rule sets. They have really good special rules to help them out achieve this objective. Not to mention their equipment and weapons that they can choose can also help them out as well. Their weapons, for example, are very powerful, especially for close combat style play, especially with chain-based weapons is what they primarily have. So chain swords, chain axes, and they also have eviscerators in this gang. And eviscerators are basically giant double-handed chain swords that also have attached flamethrowers at the bottom of them as well. So that part is really cool. Not to mention, even though they may have a lower ballista skill than most gangs, this can actually be mitigated with the template weapons that we're able to bring. Each of the gangers can pretty much bring in a what's called an exterminator. It's a one-shot flamer for their basic weapons, and that's just for your gang members, for your normal gangers, which are your brethren. So you can take those. Not to mention the flamer template weapons you could take for your characters, for your deacons, as well as for your leaders as well. At the same time, if you like the blazing weapons trait, you can get that for both their shooting attacks, but also you can also equip your gangs with the close combat attacks as well, which makes them also have the blazing trait, which is really cool. And lastly, the Articles of Faith really helps out the Redemptionists. We talked about this game mechanic earlier with the House Caldor rule sets. We're not going to really go into much detail. Just to say though, the 2 paths you want to take for this gang are either Path of the Fanatic or Path of the Redeemer. For Path of the Fanatic, you get more boons as well as more faith dice for more enemies you take out of close combat, and at the same time, the Redeemer also really helps out for enemies you take out of action as well. So either one of those will work perfectly fine for your gang. Now let's go and talk about the weakness of playing a Redemptionist gang. First of all, your fighters and equipment are expensive in terms of points. So you have some really excellent weapons and equipment, but the problem is they cost a lot of points, and so do your individual fighters. So because of that, you will always be outnumbered and potentially outgunned by your opponent. But what I mean by that is that you don't have much in terms of long-range shooting. So because of that, you'll be outgunned by other gangs who have access to heavier weapons as well as better weapons for terms of heavy weapons and long-range shooting. When it comes to close combat, you're pretty much on par with most gangs, if not better than most gangs, so you don't really need to worry about that. So because of that, you'll need to find some ways in order to mitigate that, or in order to correct being shot off the table. So if you're going against a House Van Sar, House Dalak gang, for example, you might have a much more difficult time than other gangs would, just because you don't have any long-range shooting. But we'll talk about that a little bit more in detail when we talk about your individual fighters. So now that we're done talking about the gang's strengths and weaknesses, let's go ahead and talk about the individual fighters and what they can do for your gang. So first off, we have the Redemptor Priest. The Redemptor Priest is the leader of your gang as well. So let's go talk about some of his stats as well. So when it comes to Redemptor Priest, he costs 100 credits. He's got a movement characteristic of 5, a 3+ weapon skill, 4+ ballistic skill. He has strength 3, toughness 3, 2 wounds, 4+ for initiative, 2 attacks, 5 leadership, 6 cool, 4+ willpower, and 7 intelligence. Now, this gang leader is actually pretty good. They got some good special rules attached to them. They can do group activation as always. They also have the fanatical ability, which basically means that whenever you roll double 1s for your cool check, when taking a nerf test, they can immediately re-roll that as well. At the same time, they also have some really good things as well. They're excellent close quarters combat fighters, and so because of that, you want to equip your leader as such, because that's exactly what they're going to do. This leader does not lead from the back, doesn't provide much support. You want to get this fighter stuck in and start causing much pain as soon as possible. And the best skill to probably give this fighter is actually Unshakable Conviction. It does extremely well for this fighter and actually kind of helps him out. Pretty much what ends up happening is with Unshakable Conviction, what ends up happening is that you get bonuses for your leader if he happens to be seriously injured. So I cannot state the obvious of how important that really is. It pretty much means that when you're seriously injured, you cannot be a target of coup de grace as simple actions. At the same time, you also got the Flock Together action you can take, which basically means you move a distance equal to your movement characteristics plus 3d and d3 inches towards any House Cawdor fighters or Redemptionists in this case, because you're going with a pure Redemptionist build. Most times when a fighter is seriously injured, they can only crawl at half speed. This guy can go his normal movement and then some. So if anything should happen to your Redemptor Priest, they can kind of crawl back to safety and get away from the guys who are basically causing them harm. So it's a really good build to use on these Redemptor Priests. All right, up next, we're going to talk about your champions, which are your Redemptionist Deacons. So let's go and talk about those guys real quick. So these guys are going to be your champion, basically your champion level type of characters that end up happening. So these guys cost 90 credits apiece. They have a movement characteristics of 5 inches, a 4+ weapon skill, a 3+ ballistic skill. They have 3 strength, 3 toughness, 2 wounds, 4+ initiative. They also have 2 attacks, 6 leadership, 6 cool, 5 willpower, as well as 7 intelligence. And they can also do group activation, which is 1 additional fighter. They have the fanatic rule, which means that whenever they gotta take a cool test, they roll a double 1, they can re-roll that cool test. And the nice thing about this gang is that they also have a special rule called fanatical fervor, which means that once per battle, when this fighter performs a charged double action, the fighter may double their attack's characteristics. However, when they do attack, though, they suffer -1 to the hit modifier for their weapon skill. Now, it may seem kind of counterproductive to have a 5 weapon skill to use that ability, but we'll talk about how we cure that problem here in a second. Now, when it comes to Redemptor Deacons, they can actually be used as either close combat fighters or as shooters with special weapons, and they can pretty much fulfill that role equally well as well. Grenade launchers, if you decide to use a shooting build, is the preferred weapon to use for these guys, because while fire pikes and flamers and all that may seem kind of cool, grenade launchers are the illest, and so because of that, they do a lot more and can really help out your gang much more. So because of that, that's kind of like the weapon you want to equip them with. However, though, if you don't want to equip them close with a grenade launcher, you want to build them for close combat. What I would recommend for you is to use the fanatical fervor ability, like we talked about before. Now, while I might have a 5 for the weapon skill, what you do is you balance this by taking a piety skill right off the bat. That piety skill that you choose is called Devotional Frenzy, which means that once per round of the game, you take 1 damage for your Redemptor Deacon. However, they get +3 on their weapon skill, their cool, their leadership, as well as their willpower. So because of that, that's got to really offset that penalty you take for Fanatical Fervor, and this guy's going to be a close combat machine, just chopping up and slicing people all kinds with their weapons. So that's how you kind of want to run your Redemptionist Deacons. My suggestion is that when you build a gang, is you take 2 Deacons, you equip 1 for your close combat fighter, and you have the other one be equipped to be a shooting guy with a grenade launcher, in my opinion. Alright, so let's talk about your Redemptionist Brethren. This is the meat and the core of your guys' gang. These guys cost 50 credits apiece. They have movement characteristic of 5, 4+ weapon skill, 4+ ballistic skill. They have 3 toughness, 3 strength. They have 1 wound, 4+ initiative, 1 attack. They have 8 for leadership, 6 for cool and willpower, as well as 9 for intelligence. So let's go and talk about these guys real quick. So these guys are primarily middle-tiered fighters. They got mediocre stats for the most part. So because of that, they can do shooting and they can do combat equally well. It just kind of depends on how you decide to equip them. If you decide to equip them with shooting, they only really have access to auto guns as well as shotguns, but regardless of what you give them, always equip them with Exterminator. Exterminator is a 1-shot flamer. It's a strength 3 template shot, but it also has -1 AP. So using this to open up on your opponents as you're closing the distance and then sending them charging forward is an extremely useful tactic to use with your guys as Redemptionists, especially for your brethren. Now, if you decide to take a specialist, the weapon I suggest you take with this guy is the grenade launcher for him, because that way you can lob some longer range death with frag grenades as well as with crack grenades, and so that's what you kind of want to do with these guys. So that would be the way I would build up my brethren for my gang. Alright, so let's talk about the Zealot real quick. Okay, so this one is kind of, I'll talk about that one in a second. So this guy's costing about 40 credits. For his stats are actually pretty decent for a juvie level character. He's got 6-inch movement, which is really quick. He's got the 4+ weapon skill, excellent for that. He's got a 5 ballistic skill, 3 toughness, 3 strength, 1 wound, 3 initiative, 1 attack. He's got 8 leadership, 7 cool, 8 willpower, as well as 9 intelligence. Now, here's where the problem comes in with this fighter. This fighter is a juvie level character, and this is what makes him kind of weird, because they do have +1 weapon skill and +1 cool, but it's not worth the additional 20 credits in difference that you'd pay from a normal Cawdor Juves. Cawdor Juves juvies only cost you 20 credits, while this guy costs 40. And the offset cost, there is no real benefit for that, so because of that, you're pretty much going to be skipping out on the Zealots on this one. And it's actually kind of sad. And the reason why is because Zealots in previous editions of Necromunda were your close combat berserker types. They had Frenzy on them, so they always had double their attacks, and what you do is equip them with the biggest, best close combat weapon you could and send them forward and chop up other guys. Now, in the past, Redemptionist gangs did have a fighter class called the Novice, what they were. And the Novice were your traditional Juvie level characters. They could only take pistols, they had bare minimum in terms of their equipment, you'd send them to die for the most part. And that's what the shame comes in, because when they were building this rulebook, they could have easily given a prospect class character to the Caldor. House Caldor is the only house that doesn't have a prospect level character. For example, you have Neotechs for Van Sar, you have Wreckers for House Orlok, you have Wild Runners for Escher. The list goes on for all the different prospect builds, but Caldor doesn't have that, which is kind of weird. And so because of that, you could have easily made the Zealot your prospect class gang, keep them the same stats, the same cost and everything, but what you could do is give them frosty skills that they can choose, or choose their frosty skill to kind of make them that close combat fighter that you're used to seeing from the older editions. And then of course you could have had the Novice, which could have been your classic Juvie level fighter, worth 20 credits, and then of course make them have exactly the same stats as a normal bone picker, and then that could have been it. So, but they didn't do that though, so that's the tragedy about the Zealot, which is kind of sad. So normally when it comes to building your list, you're just gonna skip this fighter. I mean, the only reason why you should ever take a Zealot in your list is because you automatically get one when you roll a 6 for your settlement territory for Dominion campaigns. But that's it. Unless you roll that 6, you're really pretty much just better off just skipping that character if possible, which is kind of sad. Now, of course, if your arbitrator allows you to do the house ruling and you make some changes, like I'm going to do for my gaming group, then by all means take a Zealot then, because then you can give them Berserker charge, and that way they can get their double attacks and make them really, really cool. But if not, though, just skip them because they're not really worth the price. Alright, so now that we're done talking about the individual fighters, let's talk about your guys' list. So the first list I'm going to show you guys what I like to call the close quarters combat list. It's going to consist of 2 Redemptionist box sets. It's also going to cost you 1,000 credits in terms of points. Now this one actually has 2 fire teams, but there's no support team on this one. You have Assault Team number 1 and Assault Team number 2. Assault Team number 1 is going to consist of your Redemptor Priest, Deacon number 2, Redemptionist Brother number 1, as well as a Zealot. While Assault Team number 2 will have Deacon number 1, Redemptionist Brother number 2, and 3. Now the main tactic with this list is to close the distance with the enemy and to catch him in a pincer attack. Assault Team number 1 should move straight towards the enemy, while Assault Team number 2 tries to flank the enemy. Now once within range, what ends up happening is that your characters who are carrying exterminators will open up their template weapons, as well as anybody else carrying template weapons on your enemy, so that way you can set guys on fire, you can scatter them, and maybe disrupt your enemy's fighting line. Now when that happens, then you charge in and you mop up whoever's left over and you just kill everybody else who's alive. This is a very aggressive playstyle which matches perfectly with the Redemptionist gang, and I would suggest taking the path of the Fanatic for this build, because you're going to get these guys stuck in close combat as quick as you can, and the more fighters you have in close combat, the better ability you have to get off faith dice for your Articles of Faith. That's the reason why I would recommend this. So let's go and talk about your individual fighters. So for your Redemptor Priest, he's going to cost you 170 credits for this fighter. He's going to have a Mastercrafted Chain Axe with an Exterminator attached to it, as well as a Stun Gun with Dum-Dum rounds. So that way they can fight with 2 weapons in the charge. They also have Mesh Armor, and they have the Unshakable Conviction for the reasons why that we talked earlier. It's a really good skill to put on these fighters. Now, Deacon number 1 is going to cost you 215 credits. This character is carrying a Mastercrafted Eviscerator as well as Mesh Armor, and has the Devotional Frenzy skill. So this is your kitted out close combat Deacon. Is going to tear it up in close combat, giving those a bonus attacks as well as a bonus stats with Devotional Frenzy. After that, you have Deacon number 2. This character is going to cost you 245 credits. This character also is going to have Fire Pikes. It's going to be your shooter for the most part, and we're using a flaming template weapon. He's also got Mesh Armor as well as Scavenger's Eye as well. Now the reason why you're taking the Scavenger Eye skill is because you get bonuses to generating money for your gang, and since because a Redemptionist gang is so pricey, it's really going to come help you out for that part. What ends up happening is that the Scavenger's Eyes, whenever you go through a scenario where you get basically determining additional for credits that you might have earned, you get +1 to that roll. So pretty much how it works. So for example, let's say that you actually caught a loot marker which is worth D3 times 10 credits. It'd actually be D3 times D3 plus 1 times 10 credits, which could really help you guys out for that one. Now, for the rest of your gang, you basically have 3 brethren. Redemptionist Brother number 1 is going to cost you 90 credits. He's got an auto gun with Exterminator as well as flak armor. And you have 2 Redemptionist Brother number 2 and 3. Both of them are equipped exactly the same with 105 credits apiece. Both have shotguns with scatter as well as slug shots. Both have Exterminators on their shotguns, and they both have flak armor. So these guys will be closing in the distance doing some shooting, setting people up on fire. And lastly, you have a Zealot for 70 credits. That character's got 2 odd pistols and a flak armor. This character's going to pretty much be like a bodyguard for your Redemptor Priest. If it looks like that your Redemptor Priest might be attacked at any point, send in the Zealot to die, because that's what they're good for, unfortunately. So there you go. That's what you have for your close combat list. Alright, the second list I have is what I like to call the Fire for the Faithful list. It's going to cost you 2 boxes of Redemptionists, and it's going to cost you 995 credits in order to field this gang. Now, this one consists of 2 fire teams. Once again, you have 2 Assault Fire teams. Assault Fire Team number 1 and Assault Fire Team number 2. Assault Fire Team number 1 is going to have your Redemptor Priest, Deacon number 1, and Brother number 1 and 2. Assault Fire Team number 2 is going to have Deacon number 2, as well as Brother number 3 and Brother number 4. Now, Flamers and template weapons are the name of the game for this gang, alright? The goal is to close the distance between your gang as well as your enemy. Now, you have a couple of gangers armed with autoguns. The autoguns will help to suppress your enemy as your close combatants move up to unleash their flamers and their exterminators. And once those flamers and exterminators go off and set people on fire and scatter them and, potentially put some people out of action, you're charge in, finish up anybody who's left over. And like I said before, because of that, you want to get a Cordy to charge off coming out 2 different directions, preferably in a pincer style attack where you're attacking from the front and the back. But if not, attacking from the front as well as a flank would work just as well. Now, this is a very aggressive playstyle which matches perfectly with Redemptionist gang, and just like before, I would highly suggest taking the Path of Fanatic for this build, because the more fighters you have in close combat, the better chance you have at generating faith dice. So let's talk about how your gang members are equipped. So first of all, you have a Redemptor Priest. This character is going to cost you 205 credits. This fighter's got an Eviscerator, so they got a good close combat weapon and a Flamer attached to it. They have Mesh Armor as well as Unshakable Conviction. And next, you're going to have Deacon number 1 and Deacon number 2, and both these guys are going to be equipped exactly the same. They're both carrying Mastercrafted Eviscerators, so they get rerolls on their attacks if they miss. They both have Mesh Armor, and they both have Devotional Frenzy. And at the same time, they also have Flaming attacks on their Flamers on their Eviscerators. Now, for the rest of the gang, these are actually going to have 4 brethren. They're all equipped exactly the same. All 4 guys are going to cost you 90 credits apiece. They're armed with autoguns with exterminators as well as flak armor. So these are more of your medium to close range shooting ability with the autogun using rapid fire. They could also use their exterminator to, unleash one-shot flamers on their opponents before they charge in and kind of finish them off for the most part. And this is what I like to call the Fire for the Faithful list. So if you're really fans of using templates, this is the list for you. Now, this last list is what I like to call the versatile list. In fact, if I was to actually play a Redemptionist gang, this would be the list that I would use for my gang. Basically, you're going to purchase 2 boxes of Redemptionists as well as a pack of COD or weapon upgrade packs for 1,000 credits. That's what it's going to cost your gang. Now, once again, this consists of 2 fire teams, but this time you have a support fire team as well as an assault fire team. Your support fire team will consist of Deacon number 2, Redemptionist Brother number 1, and Redemptionist Brother number 2, while your assault fire team will consist of your Redemptor Priest, Deacon number 1, Redemptionist Brother number 3, and Redemptionist Brother number 4. Now, the support fire team suppresses the enemy with grenade launchers as well as an autogun. This will help you pin multiple enemy fighters down using frag grenade blast templates, which will allow your assault team to freely move about to engage your enemy. Now, the assault fire team sits up on an enemy flank and they move forward. And what they do is, of course, is as they move forward, they attack with exterminators and template weapons to scatter your enemy forces before charging with both groups, both the support fire team and the assault fire team, to mop up whoever's level. Now, this is a very solid, versatile list that can fulfill a lot of different jobs, roles, as well as scenarios that might come your way. So because of that, it's because it's loaded out with a lot more shooting and some close combat in there, I'd recommend taking Path of the Redeemer for this list. And the reason why is because the number of fighters you can take out of action, both in shooting as well as combat, will help you generate faith dice, and this was the path that I would use for this gang. So let's talk about your individual fighters. So first of all, your Redemptor Priest is going to cost you 160 credits. He's got a Mastercrafted Chain Axe with an Exterminator. He's also got Mesh Armor as well as Unshakable Conviction. Next, you have 2 Deacons. Deacon number 1 is armed with Eviscerator with Mesh Armor as well as Devotional Frenzy. He's going to cost you 195 credits. Deacon number 2 is going to cost you 175 credits, and this character is carrying a grenade launcher. He's also got a stub gun for a backup weapon. He's got Mesh Armor as well as Scavenger's Eye. So because they have one guy who can shoot and generate additional credits while the other guy can charge in and fight. Now, Redemptionist Brother number 1, he's going to be your specialist. He's going to cost you 125 credits. He's going to have a grenade launcher as well as flak armor. So once again, he's lobbing those grenades to suppress his enemies, at the same time hopefully landing some kills. Now, Redemptionist Brother number 2 is going to cost you 90 credits. He's got an autogun with Exterminator as well as flak armor. So this is your medium to close range shooter. And then you have Redemptionist Brother number 3. This character is going to cost you 105 credits. And this guy's got a shotgun with Exterminator and flak armor. So he's more of your close range shooting as well as assaulting forward. And at the same time, has that Exterminator. The last Redemptionist Brother is Brother number 4. This guy's going to cost you 150 credits. He has an Eviscerator as well as flak armor. So he's got the Eviscerator for close combat as well as the flamer attached to it, so that way you can set people on fire as well. And like I said before, this is a very diverse build. You got some good long range shooting, you have excellent close combat in this, and this would be the one I would personally take if I was to field a gang for Necromunda. Alright, so there you guys have it. This is what our rank strength, weaknesses, as well as individual recommendation for individual fighters, as well as gang lists for your gangs of Redemptionists for Necromunda. And so with that, bring fire and faith to the Underhive for all intents and purposes. So like I said before, this is a very fun and unique gang to play. They got some really interesting game mechanics, especially when you combine with Articles of Faith, as well as the equipment they can bring. It could be a lot of fun for you to just basically light it up, like they say in The Crow, into the depths of the Underhive. And when I was talking about the Zealot as well as the Novices, I'm actually quite serious about that as well. If you're an arbiter for your campaign, I highly suggest you actually allow that to happen for your Redemptionist players, and for Caldar players as well. Make your Zealots a prospect level character where they can have those buffs, at the same time making a brand new level called the Novice, which is more like your Juvie, because that's what I'm going to do for my campaign if my friends decide, every one of my friends decide, or if I decide to play Redemptionists. So that's pretty much how it's going to go for those guys as well. So that's good to do for this one, you guys. As always, please feel free to like, comment, and or subscribe. You guys' input is always valuable to us. Also, check us out on Facebook, Instagram, as well as blogger.com for all the latest, greatest hobby news related to our channel. That's good to do for this one, you guys. We'll catch you guys next one. Peace out and stay classy.